Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Accidental Isolation, where I like to bring on a guest to speak about a moment in their life where they may have found themselves isolated, whether that be physically, mentally, or emotionally. I like to bring on guests to speak about moments in their lives where they can speak about moments where they were isolated. Today we have team chaplain at Furman University, Justin Brown. Man, how you doing?
What's going on, man? Doing good.
Yes, sir. Man, first, I like to always thank guests, right? Thank you for the time you've given me today. Everybody's busy. I really appreciate you giving me a little bit of your time today to speak to
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the opportunity. You caught me in one of the busiest weeks
you.
I got, but it's more than a pleasure, man. Somebody like yourself. I'm just happy to be in conversation with you.
Sir, appreciate it, man. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I would like the listeners to get to know a little bit about you,
Okay.
right? So if you want to kind of start, um, kind of where you're from, right? A kid from Warner Robins, Georgia. Just tell us a little bit about you, a little bit of background, maybe where you're from, kind of how you grew up a little
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, Georgia boy by nature. So, from Warner Robins, man, small military football town, man. So, you grow up playing ball, loving ball, and that's just what you do. And so, grew up playing ball. Went to high school, obviously. Had a good enough of a career to gain a little bit of attention from some colleges, and got the opportunity to come to Furman University and play football, and had a good career here and enjoyed my time here. Most importantly, graduated, finished, and went into the coaching world for a little bit, man. So coached football for about 5 years on the collegiate level, and just saw some success in that fairly quickly, really quickly at a young age, and so was excited about that. Thought I'd be coaching my whole life. Loved coaching. Always wanted to coach college, and just really got pulled out of that after I got through about year five. Just really felt the nudge to go into something that was a little bit more, and I hesitate saying this because I don't want to make it seem like coaching isn't meaningful, and I think it absolutely is. But I think as far as God's calling on my life, it was just in a different area, and so got called into higher ed administration, and so I spent, from 2014 on, I've been an athletics chaplain. In some capacity at universities, and maybe serving in other roles, and that being in addition to, but have served to help college students, get through the muck and mire of their college days, and a lot of them even post grad. You know what I mean? So I still have guys.
Me included.
Yeah, I still have guys and girls that I talk to who reach out to me. I get to do weddings. You know what I mean? All that and above. So, so stepped out of the coaching world and went into administration and left. Eventually left Mercer. Ended up at North Greenville for a few years where we met. Served there for 4 years, and then most recently got back to Furman. And so been here for about 8 months now, and just working the same journey, man. So loving it. Got a wife and twin girls that turn one soon. So just enjoying all facets of life, man. It comes at you fast, and so you just got to take it and run with it.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the fact that you saw after doing what you thought you loved at the time, which was coaching, jumped into it, saw success early as well. So I know that can be a little overwhelming, but exciting at the same time because like this is what I wanted to do, and I'm doing it well early. Oh, my life's gonna be great, right? I'm gonna be a head coach at some big SEC school one day, right? But then something happened, and you was like you said, coaching isn't meaningful, right? It is very much meaningful, but you said, with my passion and the drive with the Lord, you saw something different, right? So the podcast is called Accidental Isolation. And it speaks to once again the moments in your life where you may have been isolated. You might not have known in that time that you were isolated. It could be physically, right? Physically remove yourself from people, or you could be surrounded by millions, thousands, right? But mentally and emotionally, you kind of remove yourself. So you know that the viewers know what that means. Let's kind of take the time and maybe figure out some of those moments in your life.
Yeah, so I think, man, not to get deep and dark, I think one of the most pivotal, and I would say probably most recent, was back in the end of 2019 when my dad passed, which was weird to me, right? It was really weird because, like, by no means did me and my dad have a bad relationship, but we just didn't have, like, we didn't, like, I talked to my mom every day, You know what I mean? Like moms is life. I grew up with my moms. My parents divorced when I was 1, so I talk to my moms every day, and like I already know when that day comes where she has to like that's gonna be tough. You know what I mean? But when my dad passed, it was different because we didn't necessarily talk every day. Like we might have sometimes it was like maybe once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month. You know what I mean? Not that it was anything bad. It's just we just went through our ebbs and flows and never like negative. It was just that's just how it was. You know what I mean? My dad was very active growing up. He was very supportive of me. But when he passed, it was tough, right? It was one of those tough situations to deal with, and it really left me. And maybe it was, I can get into some what I think it was, but it just surprised me because I didn't think it would affect me in the way it did. And maybe it was the situation in total. So, to add context, I had been at North Greenville at that point for about a year. Um, and North Greenville is kind of in the middle of uh,
Nowhere.
nowhere. It's in the middle of nowhere, and so you're kind of isolated within that community bubble, which is not what I'm used to. I'm used to kind of being in the middle of everything, and so I had that I was dealing with for a year, and so I was kind of isolated out there. I was an adult living on campus, and then my dad passed, and so I hadn't in Greenville, I hadn't built that community of friends outside of work, right? And although I worked with some great people who were very supportive, and I'm very appreciative of them, it's different because it's almost sometimes hard to separate that work and personal. And so when you have that personal group of friends, and I have my friends like that are, we're all in our separate places, but having that group of people that I could lean on outside of work and work friends, I just didn't have that. So it was a tough time. It was a real tough time.
It's definitely hard to separate when you like you say you're living on campus as well. So it's like trying to communicate and doing that. Right. So being in Tigerville, South Carolina, which is in Greenville, South Carolina, just a small bubble. I can attest that once I started writing my memoir, my isolation was indeed in Tigerville, South Carolina, at North Greenville. Um, so that's something we actually have in common. That maybe I know that's when my one of my isolations started. But do you think that that could be where it started? Like you said, it could have been the situations and being in Tigerville. That's one of the things I face as well. You're in this small bubble, so far away from the city of it's like 25, 30 minutes away. Walmart's 15, 25 minutes away. So you don't get out often. All you have is that bubble of people there. And that can lead to the type of isolation that I have and potentially you had, where physically I'm still here, right? I'm going to come into work every day. I'm going to go into school every day. Communicating, we're talking. You might not notice anything at all, but this isn't me. What is it, right? Could you speak a little bit about maybe how that experience was and maybe why you may have felt like it kind of isolated you a little bit?
So it's tough because one, like I'm a workaholic by nature, right? I'm a grinder. That probably comes from my sports background, and then start my life off and working in athletics. Like if anybody listening works in athletic or knows somebody, like the hours. Like I'm used to working 7 days a week. So like when I coached at Mercer, we did morning practices. So we're practicing at 6 a.m. So every day I'm up at 4 a.m. and I'm trying to get into the office, get to the weight room, get a workout, and then get up, get my stuff ready before practice. So it's early mornings, and then it don't mean you're leaving any later. You know what I'm saying? Like or any earlier. So you're talking starting practice at 6 a.m. and I'm still leaving the office, 6 p.m. You know what I mean? Which makes for a long day. And by the time you get home from that, you got enough time to eat, relax a little bit, and you get back in the bed because you need that rest. And so I'm used to that grind, but there was also separation because I lived 20 minutes away. And so I had time to kind of drive and get away, separate myself from the campus. I'm working those long hours. When I was at North Greenville, what would happen was I would work those long hours,
And walk up there, walk up the hill.
and I lived 30 seconds away. And so there's no time to separate. Like my personal and my work and all that is so interconnected, and it just became this big cycle. Like there was no separate. So there were times where I would try to purposely get off campus, or get out of Tigerville to kind of clear my head. But a lot of times I just didn't have time for that. You know what I mean? So I'm basically in between my apartment and my office, and those were the two places that I frequented for so long, and I wasn't getting out, and it kind of, I mean, it puts you in an isolated place, right? Because you're not getting out seeing people, you're not. So even now, like, on the way home from work now, like I may stop somewhere, you know what I mean? So there's interaction with people outside of that bubble, but there was not that separation. It was here and there, right? And so I think that added to some of that isolation and kind of that situation as a whole.
I can see why, because being a student there, especially not having a car or anything like that, like we can't leave, right? And for those who don't know, North Greenville was a small Southern Baptist Christian school. So being there and not being able to leave and get outside perspective, regardless of your religion standing, right? Being able to just like he said, leave, even though he doesn't live on campus now, he still stops by, right? He can't wait to get home to his kids and his wife and things like that, but he stops by to go get a different perspective of life, just a different conversation. Because he knows when he once he goes home, it's a little bit of the same, not the exact same thing, not to say it's monotonous or anything like that, but it's a routine. And sometimes routines can cause that isolation, just because that's being able to be used to something. One of my high school coaches used to always say, in life you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And sometimes when you fall into a routine and you get too comfortable, you start to maybe lose aspiration, right? You start to maybe lose that just creative juice that keeps us as human beings moving around, right? Because I know Greenville, it's my work. I love my work. I love the people I work with, but there's no, like you said, separation. There's no time to think about anything, right? Um, right now we're looking at views of mountains. That's one beautiful thing Greenville has, and that's something I started to do as my senior year came, and something I regretted not doing more so in college was getting out and being able to use the mountains. Now I love hiking, right? And I moved away from it. Now I'm in the city, right? But that's something I wish I would have did more. And even you searching for things to do did not have time, right? So it's not the fact that you don't always have the resources to be able to kind of work through a mental issue, right? Or isolation. It's not necessarily that we don't have the resources, we don't have the time or may not make time. As you were going through this isolation, or we were going through this routine, might not be isolation just yet, right? This is when your father passed, right? Um, I want to ask what changed or what effect did that have on that routine?
I think what changed for me, and this may sound kind of weird, and I'm always figuring out, especially as somebody who is in ministry, and as somebody that a lot of people rely on for like advice and comfort and spiritual guidance. When my dad passed, the thing that changed mostly is I didn't want to talk to anybody. And mainly because when it kind of hit the fan, or when like people started figuring out, I was getting so many calls and texts. I was getting, and I didn't, and I hadn't. I'm a slow process, like I'm a processor. Like I'm not one of those people that it hits you and you move on. Like I need to feel this. I need to work through this. I got to think about how I'm feeling, especially because me and my dad's relationship was somewhat complicated, right? And so I had to work, but I was getting so many calls and texts. Like it got to a point where like I tried to respond and answer to the first few, but then I got to the point where I'm like, if it ain't my family or like, you know what I'm saying, my inner circle, like I'm not answering it. You know what I mean? And I had to be okay with that. You know what I mean? Like I know people are used to me being the jovial, happy, optimistic person, but it was just a space and time where, and that wasn't just like right when it happened. That was like when it, that was like when it happened, and even like time after, like when I had left, obviously went to be with my family and handle all the, the funeral arrangements and all that, and even getting back and starting the, even when you get back, because people treat you different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I'm the same person.
yeah, like I don't, and so it's like just dealing with all that, and I'm like, I don't like attention as crazy, and so it's like there's more attention brought on you, and then people are asking the same questions, and then what I really learned, like people can say some really insensitive stuff.
Very much so.
You know what I mean? Like, um, this may not even sound insensitive, but I heard so many times like, well, how did it happen? Was it expected or was it out of nowhere? And it's like, does that really matter? And then it's like almost what You know what I mean? Like that doesn't change how I feel about it. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't make any difference. And like
Or is that
what?
going to affect how you treat me?
Yeah, and then it also makes you relive it, right? You have to relive it if you're getting to a place of, starting to get back to some sense of a new normal, right? Now you got to relive it because somebody's. So it's like, so people, said a lot of insensitive stuff, and so it was a learning experience for me, but it was one of those things that I think that, and maybe I drove myself into isolation because of that, but it was also what I needed. Like
Yes.
I needed to get away from all those questions and people. Like I didn't want to hear. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to reply to text, and I didn't want to. And so it's like even as I navigated my workday, I would avoid routes of
People.
you know what I'm saying? Like so I'm avoiding times where I know it's gonna be busy because I don't want to talk to, or you know what I mean. And so maybe I drove myself to a bit of isolation, but it was needed, and it's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I'm glad you said that last part. It's 100% okay, and that's like another reason why this platform is here to show people that it is normal, right? Everyone, I don't care who you are, right? You could be rich, you could be broke, you could be doing your dream job, you could be doing whatever, you know what I'm saying? Everything that you think may make you happy, you may fall into isolation. And that is okay, right? It's not something that it's shunned upon, right? Mental health, after COVID, has this big uproar. And that's one of the best things that can happen for. A lot of people may say, now too many people, everybody have mental illnesses because they do. And they weren't talked about, right? And people, especially men, athletes, and black men, right? So we fall in a lot of different categories that tell us not to talk about it, right? As men in general, we're always taught to be strong, right? We don't, men don't cry, maybe, right? Then as black men as well, the way we grow up sometimes, um, it's viewed upon as common, right? Which a lot of times it is, but it's at that point when things are common. Sometimes they say, "Oh, it's you see it. Why should you worry about it? You see it every day, right?" And then as athletes, right? With injuries, with anything, keep going. Third down, you give it up. It's the first down. Keep going. Short term memory, let it go. You know what I'm saying? Move past it, right? So we fall in a lot of categories that say mental health is not important. Um, but you realize during that, right, that this is okay, right? And I'm bringing this platform here because I want you guys to realize that accidental isolation is okay. And now what I'm about to ask him next is how did he work through that? Because since it is okay, we obviously don't want to be stuck there for a long time, right? They may fall again, but while we're in it, and once we start to realize that this is what we're going through, let's try to use some healthy ways to maybe figure it out, right? Not necessarily get out of it, because like you said, you can't get past what had happened, right? But we have to be able to work through it. So that's my next question. Kind of how now you realize like I don't really want to talk to people. I'm avoiding people, right? And I need it because I'm a processor. And if I'm answering your questions, like 100 people's questions, the same question at that, right? Um, every single day, it's going to drive me even to a deeper hole, which is something I know I don't want, and no one else wants for me. So I have to do what's best for myself, which was isolate myself, right, physically. Um, so now you notice this, but eventually, obviously, you are a joyous person, right? Eventually, you got back to that. When do you say, well, not necessarily when, but how do you say you kind of navigated that time in your life?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to something you
Yes, go
said
ahead.
because I think it's pertinent to this, and I think it's pertinent to my life. And I explained this to my wife one time because we're talking about communications and expressing as a man expressing my emotions, and you went through kind of the layers as a black man, as an athlete, all those layers, as black male athlete, right? So you're stacking on the layers.
Exactly.
Um, and I gave her an example, and I'll be honest, I can't remember if I thought of this or if I heard this somewhere. So I'm not,
It's like, we're gonna say you did.
I'm not fully taking credit unless if somebody can find where I heard this. But I was telling her, I was like, you got to understand, for me, life has been about, are you injured or are you hurt?
Exactly.
And that's what I've played football since I was 6 years old, right? Most of my mentors, all of the men I've looked up to that have helped raise me, have been my coaches. And the question you get asked when things happen to you is, are you injured or are you hurt? And they're speaking in a physical sense, but how we relate that to every aspect of our being becomes translated that way for us, right? And so when I think about my emotions, I subconsciously, I'm asking myself, are you injured or are you hurt, right? And so for people that don't understand, right, injured is like when a coach asks you if you're injured or you're hurt, if you're hurt, you can still play, right? Because it's like something just hurts, like my ankle hurts, my foot hurts, my leg hurts, but I can still run, I can still do everything. It may not be the best, but you can still get through it and play. If you're injured, it's maybe like something's torn or something's broken and I physically can't play. But then what I also had to realize were there were times in football where I was injured and I was still playing.
Perseverance. Because you don't want to let these guys down. Like every mentor, every positive figure in my life has been a coach or someone who, all in all, needs something from me, right? I got to give that to him.
Yeah. So I came to a realization. So as I'm processing this, I had to come to the realization because I was thinking I was just hurt, but I had to come to the realization that emotionally, I was injured. And everybody knows the only way to fix an injury is to go see a doctor, right? You can sit there, you can try to let it heal on its own, and it may heal to some capacity, but you're going to have to deal with it again. You know what I mean? As soon as you get back to being athletic or playing in sports, something's gonna happen, and you can't. There's no bypassing. So I had to understand I was injured, and I think I came to the realization at a point that I was injured, and I had to see somebody about my injury. And for me, that was going to see a therapist. It was something that I had wanted to do for. It probably took me 2 years, if I'm being honest. Right? It took me 2 years to do, not from my dad's passing, but because I had thought about it before then. But I think his passing was the point of me coming to a realization of I'm injured and I got to go see a doctor. And so I just started taking the steps to, go get my x-rays, MRIs, and figure out what I needed to do to rehab. And if I needed surgery, then you know what I mean? And so I found a therapist. And I will say, like, when we talk about resources, a lot of people, if you're a full-time employee, a lot of you have, and I didn't realize this, right? You have EPA, which is an employee assistance program, EAP. So employee assistance program that gives you free counseling sessions through your job. And so I figured that out, and I went through my job, and I got some free counseling sessions.
I take advantage of that as well. I started going last fall.
Okay.
Kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm a mental health advocate. I'm doing this. I know I've been through things myself, but how can I sit here and advocate for things, advocate for resources, and I haven't tried it? And I know I go through things, but I'm preaching these things. I haven't tried it. So luckily, I use my mom because I'm under 25, so I can use hers. But I was using her EAP program. I'm still in counseling to this day. My counselor is doing me a huge favor and allowing me to continue to go.
Yeah. So I utilized that EAP system and started the work. And there's an adage, right? You've heard it: hurt people, and injured people injure people. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I was injured, and working with my therapist, I could start to see the injuries that I had caused because of my injury. And so this goes back to, kind of talking about what I think was so devastating to me about my father's passing is our disconnect was not physical in a sense of him being present. Our disconnect was emotional. And that was the injury that was there for me. And so even in my relationships, I had a line of injured people because that emotional connection wasn't there, or I was waiting for his emotional backing, right? His emotional affirmation, and I never got that. And I think that's what hit me so hard. And I didn't realize it in the moment, but it's like after we began to talk and I started expressing things to her, and it's like your whole life she used validation, that emotional validation, and you never got it. Because my dad said things like, I love you here and there, but we weren't big on that. We weren't big on but that emotional validation in a consistent basis just wasn't there. But his is what matters the most. There's a book called Wild at Heart that talks about a man's need for another man to validate him. Right. Another book I like is, and gosh, I'm about to mess his name up. Jason, the Cave of Adullam, he's in Detroit, up in Detroit. Does with the kids doing the martial arts and stuff.
Okay.
Bald head guy with the glasses. I can't think of I'm sorry, I'm messing up his name, but he has a book called Cry Like a Man that was also very pivotal for me. In understanding that emotional sense of being a man and a black man at that and working through that. And so that emotional side is what was so devastating for me and really sent me into that isolation. And it wasn't until I began to work that out through going to therapy sessions, and being able to fix myself and get from a place of being injured and then living in a space of being healed that way, that I began to find my way out of that isolation.
That's powerful. Simply because it's your truth.
Mm-hmm.
That alone makes it powerful, right? But being able to one learn those things and having obviously your therapist allow you to find those things. I want to speak on one thing you said uh, that just speaks numbers that sometimes people forget.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when going through isolations, right, or going through any injuries, or going through anything in life, right, even if you're trying to get your dream job, you're trying to achieve whatever you want to achieve, um, work.
Yeah.
That's the root of everything, right? You were an athlete, like you said. I was, a lot of people are athletes. Work got you the firm in the play.
Mm-hmm.
Work got you those jobs in coaching. Work got you to where you are now. Just like anything else, right? Work get you that promotion you wanted, right? And we take that and we know that.
Yeah.
We know that if I want to get here, I have to work,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of times we shut down when it comes to our emotions. And this isn't just a man or a black man perspective. This is everyone.
Yeah.
A lot of times we look at emotions as that nagging little brother we don't want, right? Or we just look at emotions as uh, something we don't have to deal with. Something that they're there, but it's okay. Perseverance. We're gonna get through it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like just like you said, if you try to fix it by yourself, right, or which can be done, but if you try to do something and it's not 100% effective, and then you move past it, it'll come back to you. And at the end of the day, you have to realize that you have to do the work.
Yeah.
To get through all these isolations, right? I have all these wonderful guests coming on the show. They're going to explain how they got through their things. Hopefully, you can learn so much from them, or maybe go through things like that, because everyone has to deal with death before. So hopefully, some of the things he's saying can help you and guide you through that. But at the end of the day, you have to realize what he did was the work
Yeah.
to get better. That's something we all have to do because we all want to get better, and we have to want it for ourselves as much as other people want it, right? You were mentioning that people will come up to you, they'll ask you the same question, right? They'll ask you all these things, right? They may want you to be back to your happy, joyous self, because that's what you are. At the end of the day, you're happy or joyous. You bring light into every room you walk into, right? One of the reasons I wanted you back on the show, right?
Yeah.
Because like you said, what you do now, that's literally what you do, right? You mentor people, you speak things, and everything you can speak through is either one through your religion, your faith, and two through experiences.
Yeah.
I generally feel like that's how people learn best, through stories and through experiences. That's one of the reasons I wanted you on the show. You would walk through campus and sometimes you would avoid some of the people. And at the end of the day, these people wanted you to get back to that happy, joyous self.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you would have never done that if you didn't realize you have to do it. You have to do the work yourself. So you have to want it for yourself, man. I want to go back to a little earlier in your life story, right? You graduated Furman. Congratulations, right? And that's the number one goal we want, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to go play football, but as an adult, you want to finish that
Yeah.
degree. You went on to coach. You had a good coaching career, 4 to 5 years. And then you said something happened, and you kind of wanted to do something a little more meaningful with your faith.
Yeah.
Let's speak about a little bit what happened during
Yeah.
that 5th year to kind of make you want to change over your career.
Yeah. Yeah, I could say so. For me, the shift, it wasn't like it was out of the blue one time thing.
Okay.
Right. I think in my heart I had known that there was something different for me, but I had desired to be where I was for so long. It was hard to even conceptualize the thought of leaving
Something
it,
different,
right?
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's something I had worked. Like, I mean, when you grind for something so hard, so like my first year out of college, I wanted to coach college ball and I couldn't get an opportunity. And so the only opportunity I had, was coaching at a high school football team, and they didn't. I wasn't teaching, I was just coaching, and so I got an adjunct position, and I made $3,000, like basically $1,000 a month for like August, September, October. But I got hired in January, right? So the coach was like, "Look, I can't pay you. Adjunct positions only get paid for 3 months, but we about to start winter, spring, and all that, and I want you here." And so I had to figure out how to work that. And so when you are coaching at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it ain't many jobs, you know what I'm saying, that are going to hire you. So I did what I had to do. And so I was working night shift stocking at Sam's. I had a college degree from Furman, which is a prestigious, I mean, I'm making $8.25 an hour. You know what I'm saying? I got a college degree making $8.25 an hour so I could go coach. And I wasn't making enough there, so I had to pick up another part-time job. So I was literally, for a span of about a year, I slept for like 2 hours a day. Kid you, no lie, because I was working night shift 8 hours, had to pick up a part-time job, and I got about 2 hours of sleep in between. I was a front desk associate at a gym, and then I was going to coach in the afternoons. You know what I mean? So it was, I had grinded, man.
For the love of the game.
Yeah. So, and then I did that for a year, and then I finally got my opportunity to be an assistant coach at the collegiate level, which is what I wanted. And so the thought of leaving that was tough. But there was a moment, there was a kid I was coaching, and all my players know how much I love them, and they can come and talk to me at any point. And I remember we had a practice, and I'm passionate. You know what I mean? Like I can get passionate, and I remember I've never cussed at a player, but he was doing something wrong. He just had a bad day, and I was getting into him, right? I'm trying to help him get right, and I'm also reflecting what I've seen out of coaches, right? I can honestly say I wasn't my own coach, right? I was very new. So I'm, imitation is what I knew. And so they're probably better. Like if I was coaching now, I would coach in a completely different way, not with less passion, just with better communication.
Better vocabulary.
Yeah. And so I remember there was something going on with them post-practice outside of football, and there was a barrier there though because of his bad day on the field. He wasn't able to open up and communicate with me because I was his coach, right? And because I was the one correcting him and yelling at him and all that stuff. And for me, that was a point of like, no, I want to be here for the off the field stuff. Like I don't want any barriers. And I think it's also a faith thing. Like I can truly say God showed me through several signs of like, this is where I want you to go. Like I appreciate you being here as a coach and you're doing great, but there's different for you. Not necessarily better or worse, but there's different. And I want you to do that, and that's your calling. And so realizing that was tough. I mean, and it was tough because literally one day my coach came and told me, hey, we're giving you a $15,000 raise. It's a true story. I just got a $15,000 raise. And then 2 days later, I walked in his office and told him I had to resign. You know what I mean? How many people, resigning after getting a raise,
Especially a multi-$1,000 raise.
So I got a raise, and I was like, oh, for sure. But then God showed me clear as day, like, no, I got something else for you. And my next job was a pay cut.
Okay, yeah. Usually how it happens.
You know what I'm saying? My next job was I actually probably just got back to that like a few years ago, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
Right? The journey was worth it. And I was where I was supposed to be. I am where I'm supposed to be because I was where I was supposed to be. And it all works out in the end the way it's supposed to work out if you just follow your heart and you'll be obedient, man.
That's crazy. Yeah, you might be one of the few. But no, like you said, man, you where you're supposed to be. So how was that transition? Right? You're young, right? 3-4 years ago you was making $8 an hour plus a $3,000 a year, plus maybe another $10 an hour at the gym, right? Sleeping 2 hours a day, for that $15,000 pay raise. That's what you were doing that for, right? And that was just going to be the first of that, right? And then obviously you went through different situations, right? that you said God put in your life, and you declined it, or you accepted it, but then you resigned shortly after. Um, it had to be some sort of shock, or not necessarily a shock, because you said it wasn't something that just happened right, one day. It was something you were thinking about. What was that transition like? Right, we're taking this pay cut, but I know it's for the greater good. What was that transition like, and how did you? Where did you go? Where did you transition to, and how was it?
Yeah, it was tough. It was absolutely tough. One, because I walked away from the money. I mean, I ain't trying to minimize that for people.
Yeah,
Like,
money.
I don't work for money,
Yeah,
and never have. I've never picked a job for money, but money matters, right? It's
how
a
you live.
necessary thing, and so that was hard, especially when you work so hard for that. The transition, I mean, it was difficult. What made it a little bit easier is because my shift was to athletics chaplain there at the school I was coaching at.
Yes, at Merce, right?
Right,
Okay, right.
right. So I didn't have a complete break away from it. I imagine if I had been coaching and then gone somewhere completely left, it would have been a little bit more difficult. But because I was still there and the kids I had recruited, built relationships with, I could still spend time with them. That made it. That made the transition a little bit easier. What made it difficult was because you don't leave something and not still have that itch for it.
Especially being at the same school you were
Yeah.
just doing it at.
And I like to think I was a good coach, right? I was growing. I had been promoted, gotten a raise, and the other part of that was I had other coaches approaching me about coaching jobs, and still do to this day. Oddly as it sounds, right? It's always like, but I think people are attracted to. Again, I said I'm passionate. Like, people are attracted to that passion, and they know when you get me, you're getting somebody who's going to give you 100%. You know what I mean? And so, I still had coaches coming at me of like, hey, let me know when you're ready. I got a spot for you. Let me know. And I had so much of that. And I'm telling you, it was hard. Like, it'd be like turning down the first 1, 2, 3 is easy because
Yeah,
you like
this is what I
you
wanna
knew
do.
you got that enthusiasm, right? But then it like keeps coming. You start that ego,
Like, hold on.
and you like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. But you just, again, it's gotta like, you gotta just be obedient to what you know is right. You know what I mean? And it works out for you. And I can tell you, like, things happen where God confirmed, like, no, I got you in the right place. And so one of the things for me, I always wanted to go to grad school. I always knew I wanted to get a master's. And so when I changed positions, I was working for an organization called FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and serving as the chaplain through them. So I wasn't working for Mercer anymore. And Mercer had a deal where you could, you got a discount if you were in school. I wasn't working for them no more, so that discount didn't apply to me. But what I did was I went to the president. True story. I went to the president and I said, hey, listen, I'm not working. I've resigned from coaching, not working. And I said, with the years I've put in, it qualifies me for a 50% discount if I was still working there. Would you be able to honor that so I can start taking graduate school courses next fall? And he just sent me an email, said, hey, let me get back to you. About a month went by, dude, and I ain't hear nothing. So I was like, oh, this dude done forgot about me. Man, kid you not, one day I got an email from him. He was like, hey, we're going to cover your full tuition for your grad school program as long as you're serving the kids. And so that was one of those moments of like,
Gratitude.
God confirming, like, nah, I got you in the right place. Like, if you just, and not only that, so in that, I didn't just do one master's program, I did two. So I got out of there with 2 masters and 0 debt, 0 money paid. All I had to do was pay for my books, bruh.
That's incredible.
So when I tell you, like, that was a moment of confirming and him saying, like, no, I put you in the right place. Like, just rock with me. Like, I got you. And so I think that was really one of those points where I was like, oh, I made the right decision. I mean, that was just, again, a confirming thing. I knew I made the right decision, but had made the right decision, and everything has kind of flowed from that.
It's nice to know when you make a big decision like that, like, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah,
You told me to do it, I'm gonna do it.
absolutely.
Right? I'm gonna take the pay cut a little bit. I'm gonna take all these hits. But you know what I'm saying? Like, even on the football, I'm gonna take these hits, but let me
Yeah.
break one.
Yeah.
Let me break one tackle. And
Yeah.
that's incredible. And it speaks to you in your character, like not just your passion, but your character. You carried yourself, I'm pretty sure, I am sure, because you do it to this day. You held yourself to a certain standard, and whenever you met people, you were always there with them. Like
Yeah,
you left something with him. And for him to be able to cover that full tuition, not one but two,
bruh.
no, that's incredible, man. And once again, man, he he will speak to himself, and he's very humble. Like many people, I'll bring on the show, and many people I come in contact with. But while he's on this show, I'm gonna definitely lift him up, because he's really a light. Like I said a little bit earlier, like any room he walks into, um, it brightens it up. I can speak to when I can't remember the exact moment I left him, but I do know he changed the culture around the school I was at the time, uh, especially as his job. Right, he's in the ministry, and we're at a Christian school at the same time. So we do these things every day. Right, we have to go to
Yeah,
chapel Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We have to mandatory class. Got to be there. 10 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and once again, it kind of comes into a routine, monotonous
yeah,
routine. Um, but when he came, he brought that passion with it. I'm not the most religious, but when he speaks to you, I feel it. And I
I get
also
you,
have a
man.
lot of close friends, right? Jubel's one of a lot of close friends that I've seen him touch, and I've seen the faith work through him, um, and just change people's lives. So I want to thank you for that.
Man, that means a
Thank you for
lot.
all our friends as well. So we mentioned it as we were talking, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
one of the phrases of the show is putting tools in a toolbox, right? Because you can use one tool for many jobs, right? And then there's some jobs that require one tool, right?
Yeah.
So there's different there's different things tools are used for. But I want you to kind of pull out maybe three or four, two or three tools that you would say helped you, or guided you along through all of your isolation.
Yeah. Um, Most importantly, I would say vulnerability, um, consistency. I would say determination. Um, and I'm gonna leave it there. That's three.
Gotcha.
But I think the vulnerability piece is important. I think it's, and I've learned that through life, learned that in therapy. I'm just, and this kind of goes back to kind of when I was talking earlier of coming out of that isolation. What therapy taught me more than anything was how to be vulnerable. And although I'm not perfect at it, right? I still, you ask my wife, but I at least know what it's like, and I can get there sometimes. And it becomes, as you do it more, it becomes more natural. Um, but I can honestly say, like, if I had not have gone to therapy, I wouldn't be married. Like going to therapy, I mean, me and my wife go back like 10 years
Yeah.
before we got married.
Okay.
So we had dated 10 years, been off and on, kind of friends, talking, not talking, some large gaps in there.
She's sticking through with you.
Um, but it was like, I knew that was, I told her I was going to marry her in 2016. But again, that emotional disconnect I had in my life, that emotional injury I had in my life, I couldn't be at least an adequate husband to her until I fixed that injury. And that's what that did for me. And now having a beautiful marriage with beautiful twin girls is because I decided to do the work and to allow myself to be vulnerable consistently, um, and to be dedicated to
Yeah. Yeah, I think vulnerability is definitely a huge one. I think it helped you in a lot of other ways as well. As two master's degrees, that was because hey, I'm not working for the school anymore, but could you? Right? You also took a step of vulnerability today. Being able to come on a show, and this is hard, right? I've asked people to be on the show, and they politely, respectfully decline. Right? I don't really want to talk about the dark times of my life. A lot of people don't. One of the main reasons, because like you said earlier, you don't want to relive that, right? So once again, I'm gonna thank you again for being vulnerable, being able to share some of your stories, because I do know whoever's listening, and if they go through anything, of your sort, and even if they don't go through anything that you went through, they are appreciative of you telling your story, being vulnerable and allowing us inside a little bit of your life, and
it.
hopefully they'll be able to gain some tools to put in their toolbox, man.
Yeah, absolutely,
So once again, I want to
absolutely.
thank you for coming on for the show. If you have anything you want to promote, not sure if you're doing anything, but anything you want to promote, any social media,
Hey, yo, hit my cash app.
but just so they'll be able to follow your story, man. You're a great person with a lot of passion.
Yeah.
Anything at all?
No, I got nothing that I'm working
Okay.
on actively. I got some ideas. I got working on a putting together a podcast right now. I got some books in early phase, and so that's to be coming. Life's hard when you got twins at the house, man. You don't get much free time. So nothing coming. I'm only on Instagram. I've deleted all my other socials, and I'm not very active on that as well. So, but feel free to follow me, Justin.m.brown. We'll love to have you follow my journey, and you'll get to see us as podcasts and books and stuff like that come out in the hopefully nearer future than the farther future.
Yes,
but
sir.
it's better to be right than to be quick.
100%.